Hello, I am Charlene Kometz, Director of Secondary School Advising at Carroll School. I am joined by my esteemed colleague, Cece McNally, and we want to welcome you to our Navigating Boarding School event. We are thrilled to have 5 wonderful panelists with us tonight, and they will be representing Brewster, Kimball Union, New Hampton, Proctor, and St. Andrews School. We know that tonight we have 8th and 9th grade families attending who are interested in hearing about life at a boarding school. And you might be considering this for your student, or it's something that you just want to learn a little bit more about. And we plan to have our panelists present some general information along with some more specific information from each school. We are so happy to have you here tonight. And what I'd like to do is have each panelist introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their school. So why don't we begin with you, Nick?
Good evening, everyone. As Charlene said, my name is Nick Wilbur, and I oversee enrollment here at Proctor Academy. We are located on the shores of Lake Winnipesaukee in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. We have roughly about 360 kids in a given year. In the 9th grade, we bring in about 55, and in the 10th grade, roughly about 30. We currently have, I think, 7 Carroll students, which we're, of course, happy to have. A little fun fact about me, I have 4 older sisters, so you can all get probably a sense about my life growing up with the amount of mothers that I had. But I live here on campus in the 9th grade girls dorm with Viv Baxter, who's a Carroll alum, with my wife and my 5-year-old daughter.
All right, thanks so much, Nick. Allison, why don't you introduce yourself?
Great, thanks so much, and good evening, everyone. My name is Allison Letourneau, and I oversee enrollment at Kimball Union Academy. We're located in Meriden, New Hampshire, and we serve 340 students in grades 9 through 12 in a PG year. And we have students from 22 states and also 22 countries currently this year. We're located on 1,300 acres in the Upper Valley in New Hampshire, and just 20 minutes from Hanover, where Dartmouth College is located. And I live on campus in a dorm, in an upper girls dorm, with my wife, who also works at KUA and teaches English and coaches soccer. And a fun fact about me is that I actually grew up in Nova Scotia, proud Canadian, and left home for boarding school my sophomore year, and I've not left the state since. So glad to see you all here tonight, and thanks for being here.
Oh, we are very happy to have you here, Allison. Thank you. Will, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Charlene. My name is Will McCulloch. I'm the Director of Enrollment Management here at New Hampton School. We are 90 miles north of Boston, right off of exit 23 on Route 93. So many of you who have experienced the Lakes region of New Hampshire and the White Mountains, all the great opportunities up here for recreation, have probably stopped for coffee at Dunkin' Donuts on exit 23 or driven by our campus. We're 340 students, 260 are boarders from over 30 countries and 27 states. And a couple of things that we offer here at New Hampton. We offer the International Baccalaureate program in the grades 11 and 12, and you should check that out on our website. Fun fact about me, I've been here this is my 13th year at New Hampton after moving here from San Francisco, and I have a son who's in the 10th grade here who stops by my office and steals all the snacks, and I have a daughter in 8th grade who's applying. So this is it's a nervous time for me. A lot of eyeballs on me from my own kids. So we look forward to helping you better understand New Hampton and all the boarding opportunities up here in New Hampshire.
Thanks very much, Will. Chris? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Okay, apparently this is my first time on Zoom. My name is Chris Bartlett. I'm the Director of Enrollment here at Proctor Academy in beautiful downtown Andover, New Hampshire, not Massachusetts. We are a school of 360 students serving grades 9 to 12. And it's funny, I'm listening to my colleagues with their fun facts, and I kind of feel competitive. We're on 3,000 acres, so, kind of a big campus. It's kind of a big deal here. We are located in a beautiful setting, obviously with mountains and lakes around us. Fun fact about Proctor would be that we have students studying off campus currently on a program called Ocean Classroom, and students studying in Spain. And fun fact about me is probably like Will, I'm a parent of a Proctor student. So I have a 9th grade daughter. And so my wife and I both work here. She teaches biology. And so we're living the life of boarding school. So thanks for having us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. And JC.
Hi, thanks for having me. Well, I'm from St. Andrew's School, as you know now. I, like many folks, I wear a lot of hats in the boarding school world. So I work in the admissions office, but I also teach in the art department. And I actually have a Carroll student in my senior level art history class this year. And he's one of the first Carroll students I worked with in admissions. So it's really fun to see it come full circle. I live in a dorm. We just moved from the freshman boys dorm to one of our largest girl dormitories. So we're adjusting to that, and it's been fun. And I coach girls lacrosse as well. So lots of variety in my day-to-day, which again is pretty typical of boarding school life. We are a small school, 225 students, and boarding grades 9 through PG. We are also international baccalaureate. We have a middle years program and the diploma program, so a full continuum through the IB program. We have kids from 17 different countries, so definitely a dynamic learning environment, especially as a teacher. It's really fun for me. And I guess it's not that unusual, my fun fact. 3 of my 4 kids have attended or are currently at the school that I teach at. I thought that was unusual, but I guess it is not so much. So hopefully I can share more information about St. Andrews later in the night.
Thanks very much, JC. I think it was a fun fact that you have 4 kids. So there you go. So I think that's pretty great.
Not always that fun, but that's okay.
So moving on to the structure of our evening tonight, the way we're going to structure this evening is we're going to offer some topics and questions for our panelists, and we're going to offer an opportunity for them to contribute or comment as they'd like. And you are welcome to use the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom throughout the presentation. You are welcome to enter the questions at any time, and we will reserve 30 minutes or so at the end to answer any of your questions. And if for some reason we can't get to a question, I'd be happy to get that answer and email it to you following the presentation. So I think we're going to move forward with some of our topics right now. And we're going to start with something that I think is on a lot of minds for families who are considering boarding school, which is the dorm and or your housing life and what that is like. So it's a source of curiosity. It's a wonder for some families. They, thinking about their child living someplace else other than their home for high school. And if you would be able to offer what that adjustment is like and what your school does to kind of offset that adjustment or help those students manage that transition, it would be terrific. So anyone who would like to jump in, please feel free. All right, Chris.
Yeah, sure. I'll take that. So first of all, the first thing I would do is just kind of acknowledge that for parents out there, the idea of thinking about boarding school is really, it's very foreign, I think, for most parents. When you bring your child home from the hospital, your first thought is not, I'm going to have them go to boarding school when they're 14 or 15. So I think that's sort of the elephant in the room, that we just sort of say, okay, look, this is the reality for most families. It's not what you're sort of thinking about right out of the gate. That being said, boarding school is such a powerful experience for so many students. And so obviously the idea of students living away from home is sort of a double-edged sword, right? The beauty of it is that students thrive when they are provided with structure from people who are not their parents. I think many of us can attest to that. But it also does mean giving up a little bit of that, that day-to-day oversight. And so dormitory life for us at Proctor, and I think you'll hear similar anecdotes from my colleagues, is very structured. So students come into the school. We average 12 students per dormitory. So new ninth graders who come to Proctor are typically in a dorm with, 11 other students. There are dorm parents who are basically faculty on campus who are there to make sure that students are getting up, getting out the door, getting on with their day, and then managing students at the end of the academic day when it comes time for study hall, when it comes time for bedtime, managing technology, all those sorts of things that you do at home. We do as well in our schools. We may have different systems to do that, but those things are very, very much on our mind as we're helping to sort of take these young people and guide them on a journey on their way to college, which seems like a long way off, but you think about these high school years, we're taking 14-year-olds and watching them turn into young adults as 18 or 19-year-olds. So I would just answer by saying that dorm life, residential life is very thoughtful, very structured. It provides a lot of compassion and understanding for kids and a lot of interaction for parents. And I'll let one of my other colleagues talk.
Thanks, Chris.
I would just add that was wonderfully articulated, Chris. And I think like on the topic of just like the intentionality behind our residential programs, I think one of the questions I get a lot is like, who's going to be my roommate? Like, how does that process work? And I think you should all know that I think at all of our schools, we're really intentional and thoughtful about how we're making roommate pairings. And we really take all of the information and knowledge we have about you from working with you through the admission process and really try to make a match that we think is going to be a strong one for your first year at boarding school. And we're also there for you. Like, should you run into some challenges and need some help sort of navigating natural roommate challenges, right? Like some of them are inevitable and we're here to provide you with that support, but there's a ton of intention and thought that goes into that process. And then at a lot of our schools, and I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but you typically have some choice after that first year, right? And thinking about who do I want to live with? And we really want to empower you in that decision-making process after that first year. But for that first year, there's a lot of thought and intention that goes into matching you up with someone as your roommate or roommates.
Thank you, Allison.
One of the things that I've gathered from working with families from Carroll over the years is so many of them make incredible sacrifices to get to the school each day, and sometimes that's 25 minutes, an hour and a half in traffic, and so as you consider boarding, it's getting a lot of time back, but also having that structure, so you have more opportunities outside the academic day to connect with your teachers. So, right now it's 6:45. Our students have probably just finished up dinner. They have a little free time. They're checking into their houses at 7:45, and then they have our 9th and 10th graders, a study hall from 8 to 9:30 in their houses. The door is open. The house parent is going around connecting with them, asking them, hey, how was your day? What are you working on for homework? And, none of their friends are doing anything different. So there aren't really any distractions. Whereas if they're at a day school, they're going home. It's okay. What am I going to do? Can I check out my Instagram, my Snapchat? I'm going to call my friend who doesn't have any homework. Everyone's on the same schedule. And there is a lot of good that comes out of that, because you're not wondering what your friends are doing, right? Because you have your free time, but then you have that hour and a half, and you can wander down to the common room and say to your house parent, hey, I'm struggling with this essay, and they're there to support you. Whereas I think, as a parent, I've seen my kids, they're a little bit more reluctant to ask me for help on a math problem or a paper, and that might be for other reasons.
I think it's worth mentioning too, I'm wearing the teacher hat now, that when you're teaching at a boarding school and you're part of your students' lives outside of the school day. So obviously we're operating 24/7. we're living in the dorms, we're monitoring study hall, we're eating dinner together at night. And it's just a gift for a teacher as well to know those students outside of their academic day, know their world, know if they've, as Will just mentioned, if they're at study hall and they need extra help or they're working with a friend, you're very in tune to where they might be facing challenges, more so than if you just saw them in an hour-long class during the day. There's just so many touch points that happen. And I do feel like a lot of the teaching I do is in the dorm, and it's on the weekends, and it's around the dinner table. There's just all these amazing moments that I get to know them. I get to know what makes them tick. And also we learn together. So it really is a gift for both the teacher and the student.
Thanks, Tracy. So I think I'm going to move on to another topic, one that's always at the heart of a Carroll family, which is understanding, during a very full day of high school, they're very curious about what the academic support looks like at your school and how is that melded into their day. How does that work? And I would like each of you to touch on this topic, if that would be okay. And whoever would like to begin.
I'll kick it off. Obviously, Charlene, and to everyone listening tonight, it's really school specific, and it's obviously incumbent upon you as families thinking about these schools to really do some research and ask those pointed questions to best understand how each school goes about their instructional support program or academic resource program, however they define that, and what works for your child. Brewster is a bit intentional in that we have this team model that we talk about, and that how we structure the actual physical building of our academic building, and how we really integrate and infuse those academic resource or instructional support teachers into each of one of our 7 academic teams. And there's a methodology and a process behind how they communicate with classroom teachers on a daily basis to make sure that everyone's on the same page, supporting your child and working with them to the best of their abilities, and allow that child to ideally reach that potential, whatever that level of potential might be, and put them in a position to hopefully be successful. So I won't go too much into details for sake of time and supporting everyone else on this call, but it's obviously a great and a big piece to the experience of a lot of families. And obviously you're off to a great start being at Carroll, but all of us are more than happy, quite frankly, offline to talk in very clear specifics, because I do think, speaking specifically to the New Hampshire schools, we all have great programs, but we all do that in different ways. And we're here and ready to support you in your better understanding of how we go about it.
Thank you. Who's ready to jump on next?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about the program at St. Andrews, and I think Nick makes a good point. We're all different, so really, all of the Carroll parents I work with just know the right questions to ask, and you do a really great job just knowing what kind of learner your student is. Everybody's so different. We have a few different components, but during the day, during the academic day, we have blocks for support. And I would say usually in a given year, 30 to 40% of our students are coming in with a diagnosed learning difference. And also, I would say the other 60 to 70% are also looking for a small school for a reason as well, co-taught classes and opportunities for more connections with faculty members. But the academic blocks during the day that are our students that have structured support put in addition to their core classes, or classes like literacy. Focus is a class I've talked to the Carroll folks a lot about. It's probably our most common class, really targeted at executive functioning. That's about 5 students per class. Individual speech therapy, intensive one-on-one academic labs. Everybody's program is a little different because everybody's a different learner. So they're all very individualized, but those are some of the examples of the puzzle pieces that can fit into your day. In addition, all of our standard level classes, IB, English, and math, are all co-taught. So you have a core teacher, and then you have a learning service teacher as well. So there's 2 teachers in the classroom. And again, that's for all of our English language classes and all of our math classes at standard level. And then there's an evening component as well. And we're growing that program mainly because our students really need it. And we're seeing just a greater need for not just one-on-one work, but small group work in the evenings. In addition to a standard study hall, they can have 1, 2, or 3 nights a week with a learning service specialist. We piloted it last year, even during the pandemic, in a Zoom platform. So we're growing that even more this year. But again, if you want more details with sort of some case studies or some samples of what a schedule might look like, you can contact me after.
Great. Thanks, Stacy.
I'm happy to jump in here. So at New Hampton, we have a fully integrated academic support program. So as your math or English class meets 3 times a week for 70 minutes each block, you would have the same with your academic support program block. And we have 3 different levels to that. We have one-on-one support, 2 students and 1 teacher, and then 4 students and 1 teacher. And the goal for us, and we've seen this with so many Carroll students who have come through New Hampton, is they come with incredible self-advocacy skills, and they've had wonderful support and built relationships with their teachers. So they have so many strengths, and we're going to focus on those strengths and then look at how can we, as they make a transition into, slightly bigger classes and the work gets a little harder, how can we make sure that they have the confidence to become independent learners? And the beauty of our experience here with those students is that they can move on to taking international baccalaureate classes because they get that confidence. So our goal is for our students to be thinking after 1 or 2 years in the academic support program about saying, okay, I might not need this same support. And again, this goes back to boarding and the connection between the boarding experience and academic support. We have 90% of our faculty living on campus. So the relationships that they have with their students in the academic support program, as well as the faculty, make it really easy for students to get support and for people to communicate formally and informally. And I think we've seen a lot of families who have said, okay, we're going to day school. They come for a visit and they see the relationships that are built between students and faculty here. And it's something you can't really do and replicate at a day school. So I encourage you to ask a lot of questions when you're on your campus visits. Talk to those other Carroll parents who have enrolled their children in boarding schools with academic support, where the faculty really understand and have bought into the programs. And that's what we really pride ourselves on, is training our faculty as well as those academic support instructors.
Thank you.
Allison, it's either you or me.
You were about to go last time, so it's all you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. You're so polite. Proctor's academic support program has some similarities to some of the programs that have been described already. About a third of our student body is in formal academic support. It is our largest academic department within the school, meaning we have 15 learning specialists on staff, and which, we have more learning specialists than we have English teachers, for example. And so what I would say is sort of echo what Will is saying. It's this idea of integration, right? So all these schools, not just the schools on this panel, but a lot of schools out there, have really excellent learning specialists. They have folks with really strong credentials, great training. But it is really critical to think about that integration between what's happening with the classroom teacher, what's happening with learning specialist, and what's happening with a student, and how are those being tied together? Because ultimately, that is the job of a school, is to really empower a student to grow and develop and evolve and move away from support over time. That's, that would be potentially a stated goal for a lot of our schools. So, no need to get into too much detail. I would just agree with what Will said, which is it's really, really hard to integrate and to replicate what these schools are doing in a day school model. And that's something that makes these schools really, really special. So we're definitely an infomercial for boarding schools.
Thanks, Chris.
That's great. Thanks, everyone. I would just add at KUA, we also have an integrated learning support program, and so our students take it as a full class. It's integrated in their schedule. It can be one-on-one support, 1, 2, 3, or 4 times a week, one-on-one with a learning specialist, or in a small group. And then similar to some of my colleagues, we do offer an evening study tutorial as well, and thinking about making that transition to boarding school, navigating evening time study hall, and sometimes having that added support and just having someone there to be able to work with and through some assignments is really helpful. And for the parents on the call, there are reports, a small report that's written after every time your child spends a block with a learning specialist that's sent home. So you're kind of dialed into sort of what they're working on. The other thing I would add too, that's not directly connected to our learning center, but I think it is appropriate to mention, is we just last year we switched to a semester model, and we stuck with it this year too, and recognizing that it was really helpful for our students. And so students at KUA take 3 classes in the fall and 3 classes in the spring, and each class is worth a full credit. But we have 4 academic carriers. And so for a student that's in the Learning Center, they're taking their 3 full, like, year-long credit classes from September until December with an extra block for the Learning Center. And I think what we've seen is that it really allows students to dig deep in courses. Our teachers are teaching 20 to 25 students. They already know their students really well in all of our schools, but it sort of lowers that load. And it just sort of allows kids to kind of centers wellness in some ways too, and slows things down and allows kids to really dig deep. And so we found that that's been really, really successful for our students at KUA. So that's what I'll mention, and feel free to check out the website, and happy to talk more about learning support at KUA.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Allison. And thank you everyone for that input on the academic/learning support offered at your schools. I know the families are finding this very valuable as they collect information. And that leads me to another topic, which is the admissions process. So at this point, our families are in different stages. We have some that are in that information gathering phase right now, and some that are in the beginning of the process, and some who started in the spring. So if any of you are interested in weighing in on this topic and perhaps giving us an idea of what your process looks like, some tips to help the families through this and maybe relieve some of the stress that is perceived to be associated with it, it would be really helpful. And also, if anyone is interested in weighing in and if there is something different in terms of the financial aid piece and or process with that, that would be really terrific. Thank you.
So I would just say, first and foremost, for the schools that you're interested in thinking about, just give a call and get a better understanding of where that individual school is in regards to on-campus visits. Here at Brewster, we are doing on-campus visits. We'll have a small 10 family max open house on next Monday, and then one in November, but very small on purpose. There are some procedures and steps to kind of hoops to jump through in order to be a part of that. So happy to give more information on a one-on-one situation if you're curious about that. But hopefully everyone that's taking a listen to this is excited about the idea of coming to visit campuses and find it exciting. It should be kind of a joyous time, an opportunity for you as a parent and your child, or for the kids listening, for you as a prospective applicant to enjoy the opportunity to look inward, think about what you are looking for, what's important for you, and hopefully you're able to find that on that campus visit. Be able to walk around a campus and get a sense of, talking with these kids, with our kids, and what do they look like? What do they talk like? What do they seem like? And do I see myself as a part of that? It's our job on our side of the table to hopefully provide the best and most thorough experience possible. So I would always say, before you visit a campus, let that school know, let that admissions office know what you're hoping for out of that visit. It's our goal to provide the best visit possible. And so give us some time to allow us to check schedules for program directors, academic support program directors or teachers, coaches, head of school, maybe you know someone, a current student, and we would love for you to connect with that, a Carroll alum if you know that student. So give us some time. Give us some time to be able to set that campus visit up to be the best it can be, the most comfortable it can be. In regards to the interview, every school is doing it a little bit different. Here at Brewster, we're providing the opportunity for kids to do an interview or a conversation, quite frankly, as kind of like a pre-visit. So we can do that before you come visit campus. If you want to have an interview on campus, you're more than welcome to do that, but just check with every school, whether they're having that inside or outside, or if they're offering that opportunity. So unfortunately, in this kind of still interesting world, it takes a little bit of effort and work to really best understand where each and every school is with their policies and procedures. Are they asking for vaccination cards? Are they wearing masks? We do require, regardless of vaccination status, that all visitors wear masks on campus. So just do your research a little bit, and we're happy to, of course, give you those answers to, again, allow the best campus visit possible.
Thank you. Does anyone else like to weigh in? Oh, thanks, Allison.
Yeah, I'm happy to just add on. I think, like, I agree with Nick. Like, we'd love to get you on our campuses. I think it's really a fantastic way to really get an authentic, meaningful window into a school's cultures, to really step foot on campus, meet the people, engage with the place. In addition, though, like, we all ran numerous virtual events last year as a part of our process. And I think many of us are still, right, like, offering a hybrid sort of opportunity to engage with our schools. So I would encourage you to check out any virtual events schools are offering, in addition to opportunities to visit campus. I think it's a good way to also learn a little bit more about the school. And you might also check out some recorded videos from last year too. So kind of see what's out there on the internet. I think it's a good way to kind of bring yourself up to speed on school and school culture. But yeah, totally agree with Nick that come see us if you can, and definitely check out different schools' sort of rules and regulations around visits. But it's a really meaningful way to get to know a school.
Great.
One thing that's helpful for our admission office is transparency. So we really want to make sure that we get to know your child. And as with Carroll, this is a partnership, and it begins during the admission process. So we want your student to end up at the best fit in September. So if you have educational testing, if you have any concerns, share that with us sooner rather than later. And I actually think, talking directly with the director of our academic support program is a really important part of the process. It might not actually be during the visit, because I think the visit should be really focused on your child and the family absorbing as much information, asking questions. But if we have that educational testing and we can set up a call or a Zoom with the director and you, that's a good way to better understand your child and to help us in the admission process, so that we can articulate to you how we might best support your kid.
And I just want to add in one more thing about getting the feel of the school, because I'll say most private schools, and the ones that I see here tonight, we all have beautiful campuses. We all have signature programs, but there are, different vibes, and there's not a perfect fit for everybody. There's no perfect school. So definitely, I reiterate, do your homework, take a close look at the way faculty and teachers interact, what would feel the best for you. And I think a real key part of that is talk to students. Any opportunity you can get to either attend a panel, virtual or in person. You never know if we do have to shift to virtual again, which I hope we don't have to. All of us had opportunities last year to talk with students. So don't be worried about asking to talk to an ambassador, whether it's in person or over Zoom or over the phone or an email exchange, because that is really going to give you a sense of, will I feel like I belong here? And that's just a crucial part of it. If you do come through the process at St. Andrews, you you will probably be dealing with Lee McGregor, who is our learning service specialist on the admissions team. But you can also look up my information on the website, and I'm more than happy to answer questions. But she will be the main contact for learning service candidates. So.
Charlene, you wanted us to touch on financial aid in that.
So if someone would like to add, if you would,
Sure.
Nick, do you have a separate, for instance, is there a separate application? What's the timing on that? Maybe just a little bit. I want to move on to some other great topics as well, but we want to make sure that we have covered areas that are definitely of interest to people. And I think the timing and multiple applications and anything you can offer.
Sure. So in a prior life, I was a director of financial aid. And so I'll say you can start now. The sooner you start, the less anxious you're going to be about the process. Communicate with the director of financial aid, ask questions. But most importantly, for those families that are seeking financial aid, make sure you understand from every school you're applying to what the potential choices or potential decisions at the end of the road could be, because every school's going to have a different series of decisions that might come out, whether it be accepted with financial aid or accepted waitlisted financial aid or waitlisted, just so you can prepare as parents and you can support your child through this process as best as possible. But you can begin those conversations with directors of financial aid right now if you choose to. And I would say that application process is parallel in timeline with the application for admission. And I would say most all schools will try and make those decisions as independent for as long as possible, but absolutely have conversations right now if you choose to with that director of financial aid. If you find yourself on a campus visit and you want to have that conversation, again, echoing my prior comment, just let that school know that you'd love to at least poke the brain a little bit of that director of financial aid. We will have a webinar next month specific to financial aid. So that's an opportunity for you to listen in, and most likely that'll be open to the idea of the process for all schools, but just check in with each and every school.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I think I'm going to move on to a new topic, but that was very valuable information and I really appreciate the input, and I know our families do as well. How about we talk about some extracurricular offerings at your school, whether that be what are the non-academic components of boarding school? So this could be residential life, which we touched upon, athletics, arts, leadership opportunities that might be available at boarding schools, and that maybe they're a little bit different than a day school.
Well, one of the things I think kids get really excited about would be clubs. And I go back to that idea of time. When you're, the Uber driver for your kid and driving them from hockey practice to piano class to taekwondo and all these things, it's really hard to manage all these different activities. The beauty of boarding school, you can do it all. And so, we had our club, big, huge club meeting last week where kids were able to start new clubs, meet other kids who are interested in the same types of clubs. And that's an amazing opportunity because you might have an hour and a half, 2 hours in your day once a week where you can be a part of something special. And all of our schools have opportunities like that you might just not be able to do during middle school while you're at Carroll or at a day school. So we have a group that is starting called a Creators Club. And so they made an announcement at school meeting saying, hey, do you have something that's broken or a project that you need us, for instance, they might come into Mr. Bartlett's office and say, wow, that paint job's not that great. We're going to paint your office, or we're going to fix his broken chair in his office as well. So people are really creative in these boarding schools as it relates to clubs and opportunities to engage. We've given up our privacy by working at these places. It's hard for a lot of people to understand, but we're spending a lot of time with kids. And I think clubs, a lot of people talk about clubs at day schools, But at boarding schools, we have the time to do it. So I think talk a lot about that during your campus visit and find out what opportunities there are on these campuses.
And
Chris?
I would
Oh,
say,
sorry.
oh no, that's all right. Part of that rolls right into weekend activities and clubs and extracurriculars. We do have the weekend to work with as well. And our day students do return to campus. And I think that's probably pretty typical of all the schools because there's lots of exciting things. But we can offer those programs on the weekends because it's kind of chock full during the week. And it really depends on what region you're looking at. I mean, I will admit, if you're looking for a competitive ski team, you're probably not going to want to come to Rhode Island because it's really flat. But we have partnerships with Rhode Island School of Design on the weekends, and we use the area. And I think all of the schools do that. You use the resources in your area and take advantage of partnerships if you can. But a Saturday, a Friday night, there are things happening all the time, and I think it's just endless opportunities for kids to explore things that they haven't tried before. Because again, it's time and it's 7 days a week.
Great.
The other piece that I would add is all of the non-academic weekend time where you're hanging out with, as Will said, the 30 kids from 30 or the 30 different countries of kids and all that indirect learning and opportunity that, quite frankly, a day school cannot replicate. And that's a huge learning and growth opportunity. All those domestic kids who are coming from a distance that don't have the ability to go home. I should also share that most boarding schools will think about and manage and quite frankly, track the weekends that kids are looking to take to make sure that the campus is as robust as possible on the weekend. So it is incumbent upon that team of faculty that are on duty every weekend to make sure there's a whole lot going on in opportunities and offerings. And we are aware of kids. We do watch kids and make sure that everything's going all right, specifically in the beginning of the school year when that transition is most in the forefront of all of our minds.
Thank you.
I would just add that one of the great things, and this is a little bit redundant, but a lot of students are, they love to be active, they love to play sports, and all of our schools have, really, sort of full and competitive and non-competitive kind of athletic programs and afternoon programs. So, at Proctor, you can play football, or you can be on a mountain biking team, or you can kayak or play soccer. And that's all great. And each one of our schools, has this amazing array of offerings. But then, sometimes students are also interested in the arts. And, a question that we get a lot is, well, we just haven't had time for the arts, or we haven't had time to fit everything in. And sort of to what my previous colleagues are saying, again, you can do that. You can be part of a club. You can also be, taking a jewelry making class during the academic day because there's just enough space and time to be able to do that. And then, head out in the afternoon and, get your exercise. And so, again, it's just wonderful to have access, not just to singular activities, but just this range and breadth of programming. And I know it sounds like pie in the sky and it sounds very idealized, but it's actually true. And when Will was talking about clubs, I was like, you know what? That's true. I went to a student club today. The kids were talking about current affairs. They were talking about the debt ceiling. And it's like, we have time to unpack some of those sorts of things because we're able to slow things down a little bit because we've reclaimed that commuting time, that specialization time, that might be dedicated to tutoring because we just have extra help here with teachers. So the whole ecosystem, it really it really lends itself to this holistic education. So the extracurriculars plug in really well.
Thank you. It really sounds quite spectacular. Really. And I do have a question. Is there a requirement with that? And as families ask, they're assuming you're at school and you're at a boarding school and you want to be fully engaged in the community. So is all students responsible to participate in a certain number of clubs/activities? If you want to just give me a brief answer on that, I think that would be helpful for people to understand how that works.
We don't have a requirement at Brewster around participation within clubs. We do suggest specifically our new 9th graders and our 10th graders new 10th graders that think about one in the beginning. Let's see how you can take on that as well as everything else that we have going on during the day. And then if you feel like you've got time, you can add a bit more. In terms of the co-curriculars between that 3:30 and 5:30 time frame, I don't want to speak for everyone, I think, but we all have some kind of requirement that keeps kids busy and productive during that time. But what that time can be or what that requirement is, every school is going to be individual. We have some kids who want nothing to do with interscholastic sports and they love art and they can do that. We have some kids that they need sports, they need that time, they need that energy release opportunity, and they can do that every season too. So every school is probably gonna be a little bit different what the offerings are, but the time commitment is probably consistent.
Great. We in agreement on that everyone pretty much has a really full, robust day, which is
Yeah,
great.
I would agree with that. I think the opportunity is to, get outside and take advantage of the surroundings. But we do have kids, as Nick pointed out, who say, okay, I don't want to play on the football team or the soccer team. And we allow them to build the set for the fall play. And I think more and more, we have to figure out ways to allow students to pursue their passions. And back when we were all in boarding school, it was, okay, you're going to play a team sport and you're going to like it. I think we've taken a step back a little bit and said, okay, we want our kids to be active, but we also need to help them really develop those skills that they want to pursue.
Thank you. And that leads me into kind of a more fun and goes right into some of what we talked about, which is what is a weekend like at a boarding school? And given that there's been a lot of changes over the year and schools you all have been very innovative in so many different ways. So this could even include what are weekends like at a boarding school and the food? What changes have happened and what's that like? You're spending your weekends potentially away from home and not having mom's home cooked meal.
I would say when we think about the weekends, we got to think about structured versus unstructured time. I can't speak for all the New Hampshire boarding schools on tonight, and unfortunately, I'm not aware with St. Andrews, but at Brewster, we have an every other week schedule where Saturday morning are classes, but consistently every Saturday afternoon is a committed time for whatever your afternoon time frame would be. So for us, when we think about free time on the weekend, we're talking really about the Saturday evening and throughout Sunday. Thankfully, we're built right into the town of Wolfboro, so our kids have walking distance, and because of our population and location, our kids still today have access to that. And so that's an affordance that they have that creates some normalcy and allows them to have that independence, which I know they thrive on, to be able to make that decision if they want to go in on a Saturday night with friends or on a Sunday, as opposed to potentially jumping on a bus and finding permissions and all those sorts of things. So I know that that's something that they greatly appreciate, specifically with regards to Brewster.
Great, thanks. Anyone else share some great weekend and what it's like at a boarding school on weekends?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I think weekends at boarding schools are so much fun. And it's just like, you're on campus with all of your friends. And I think all of our schools do a really good job, as Nick mentioned, to really kind of provide some structure and some fun opportunities to engage both on campus and off campus. And I'm sure like all of our schools have something like this, but at KUA, we have what we call a campus activity board. And it's one of the highest leadership positions at the school, but it's led by 4 students who are really sort of responsible for coming up with the weekend activities. So it's really student led. They're running a meeting every week. They're bringing in student voice. They've got a faculty mentor, and they're really kind of saying like, what should the schedule be this weekend? And they have a budget that they manage, and they sort of think about like, should we have a food truck on campus this weekend? Should we offer this trip in Hanover? Like, where should we go to Boston? Like, and so I think like when it's student led and not a bunch of adults kind of trying to guess what teenagers might want to do with their free time on the weekend, it tends to be a little bit more popular. And so I think, that's one way our schools, I think, have been really creative in sort of thinking about how we provide you with a lot of fun stuff to do on the weekends on our campuses.
I would also add that school spirit is at an incredible level at our schools. And, you can come to a boarding school and still have that experience that you might have had at, Lincoln Sudbury High School or Concord Carlisle, going to a football game on a Friday night, or some of my favorite weekends are, in the winter when our kids are bouncing from the ice hockey rink to the gym, watching, us play basketball against Brewster and hockey against KUA, and kids are supporting each other, whether it's junior varsity sports or varsity. And that can't be lost, because it's a big part of the experience here is, being a part of something bigger than yourself. And so that ends up being the play, musical performances, when you're around so many different types of kids, you're going to get out of your comfort zone. So you're going to want to support them when they're playing and performing on the weekends. And that's a lot of fun to do.
Great.
I would just add that I know parents that are listening to this, it seems like you're being left out of the vision, and you're not. So, boarding school weekends are a blast. And I will tell you that, pre-COVID and post-COVID, we have a lot of parents that are here too, actually watching those games, volunteering to, run the grill for the kids and their friends, and really be part of the community as well. So, it's not this idea that students are going away. And there's some permanence to that is really pretty far from the truth. The reality is that parents are really involved in healthy ways, and students, they do go home. Obviously COVID has changed a lot of the protocols, but we opened up last weekend, and students were allowed to go home Saturday and come home Sunday, and knowing that most of these families are within an hour and a half or 2 hours of these schools, these schools are much more accessible than, for families that are coming from California and that sort of thing. So just sort of recognizing that we haven't left you out of the equation. You're still invited.
And there's a little bit of additional information for parents too, and this might be maybe a little bit more specific to schools that are near the city. So we're like 10 minutes from Providence. A lot of what we do on the weekends sort of is pending parental permissions too. So parents are still in control, and they change their permissions throughout the year as they get older. On Friday nights at St. Andrews, kids really want to get off campus. They want to go into Providence. There's lots of activities happening all the time now that we're kind of edging out of COVID. We're able to do that more and more, but we run, so you choose your permissions if you want your student to be on just school trips, where every Friday night we offer a trip into Providence where we're driving a van, we're walking around with the kids, whether it's Thayer Street or to a movie, we're chaperoning at all times. As the kids get older and they get to be maybe juniors, seniors, PGs, some of them have opportunities to go into the city on their own. Or even we have a public transportation right in front of the school that goes into the city. So that is all depending on what parents are comfortable with. Even if a student has full permission, we're going to ask the same questions like everybody on this panel. We're going to ask the kids the same questions that you would. Where are you going? How long are you going to be there? How are you getting there? And call me if you change your plan. So we're still keeping tabs, even if they have permission to do something off campus on their own. But parents ultimately have the final say of what kids are doing.
Great, thanks, JC. Actually, that leads me to something I'm thinking of from years past and in the panel, which was the communication. And thank you, Chris, for bringing that into the loop. The communication with the parents. How often, this was a question from years past. How often is that communication happening with parents from the school, and what do you prefer? How does it work? So if you want to each touch upon that, I think that's really valuable as people are kind of thinking about this opportunity for their student.
Sure. So I'll start us off. I always tell every family, you should set the terms. Let the school know what your comfort level is specifically in the beginning. Talk with the advisor, talk with that academic support resource director, whatever that title is, whoever that person is, allow the school to understand, as Will said earlier, this is a partnership. This is something we want to work together with you on and make sure it's the best and most positive journey and experience possible. In terms of Brewster, our kids do a self-assessment, what they call a weekly, every single week with their advisor. And that response is uploaded into our internal portal, which you as parents have access to. And so you can see. And so we know that you guys have been advocates of your kids throughout their entire journey. You might have had to be a real advocate within your town before you got to Carroll. And as Chris has mentioned, we still want you to be a part of this process. We're not asking you to be completely void or remiss of the entire experience. So we feel like at Brewster, the weekly is a great opportunity for you to still feel as though you have a voice and an understanding of what's going on, and an opportunity to respond to your child or to respond to the advisor, or as a role that we have, a team leader. And that team leader is responsible for talking about your child 3 days a week with his or her group of teachers. So there's always a team of people that you can always reach out to and know that you'll get a response in real time. So that weekly is a big one. In terms of formal grades and comments, you're talking about 6 times over the course of the school year. Allison mentioned that KUA is on semesters, we're on trimesters. So it's just things for you to think about school by school. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a better sense about Brewster.
Great, thank you.
I can jump in next. Really, the advisor at KUA is your go-to person. And I think that, just to echo what Nick was saying, that partnership is key as we think about like the triangle of student, school, and family. And so while we certainly see ourselves as like experts in what we do in education, and many of our schools have been at this for a really long time, you parents are ultimately the expert in your kid. And so the more that we can partner together, share information, have really frequent and meaningful feedback loops with each other, like the better we can serve your child. And I think that partnership is really meaningful. And so you'll hear from your student's advisor frequently, and you'll also get sort of those formal feedback loops that Nick was referring to with grades and comments from teachers and dorm parents and coaches and so on and so forth. So, but the advisor is really sort of that central person for you, and that's their role to be your contact, and to really have a finger on the pulse of how your student's doing. And then addition in the learning center, right? So I think I mentioned earlier, like if your child is in the learning center, you're getting feedback every single time they meet with their learning specialist. You're getting something home that kind of gives you a sense of the work that they did together.
Great, thank you.
So at St. Andrews, similar advisory system as many of the other schools. Each faculty has usually 5, 6, sometimes 7 advisees. They meet 2 times every day. So there's a 45-minute block second period that advisors and advisees are together. And then they check out with their advisor at the end of the day for an additional 15-minute block, just to see. It depends on the student. Sometimes it's how was the day? Sometimes it's let's make sure you have that book for tonight because I heard that you forgot it last night. It's really individualized. And then every 2 weeks, the advisors and the parents have a conversation. It can be either over the phone, over Zoom. Some parents prefer email. It just, again, parents set the tone. How are you comfortable communicating? That doesn't mean that if it's only been a week and it's not the 2-week mark and a parent has a concern, the advisor is always really the first contact person. It's a little bit more informal in the dorm here. The parents have our cell phones, so we talk a lot, and in both ways, I contact parents if I need help, sort of, with some struggles we might be having, and vice versa. So that works. The after school conversations just seem to happen when the parents want them or when we need them as well.
I don't have a ton to add other than just, it's a continuum, right? So when students come to our schools, especially as 9th graders, they're 14 years old. And so parents are very much part of those conversations, right? We're pushing a lot of information out because we want to make sure that, first of all, that we're serving your child really well, and that you're also able to give us really important feedback. And then over time, the goal is to really put the student in the middle of the feedback loop. so that, we're at Proctor, we write these sort of weekly, actually every other week, they're getting these academic updates, and they're actually written to the student. And so what happens is the teacher is saying, Will is doing really wonderfully in biology. He did a wonderful presentation on mitosis. He did miss a few things in our last lab, and here's some action steps he can take. It's written to Will as the student, and the advisor, the dorm parents, the learning specialists, the coaches, everyone who's in that student's constellation is watching that conversation unfold. And what we're really trying to do is bring students along so that they then are, taking responsibility for the action steps, because obviously we're taking students from, again, 14-year-old just left middle school to 17-year-old, 18-year-old graduating from our schools and going to college. So it's really important to see that progression happen over time. But we do not get a lot of complaints about lack of communication. I can guarantee you that. I don't think any of my colleagues do either. So it's good.
Great. So I do have a few questions and some that were emailed to me today that I'd like to address and or offer the opportunity for people to weigh in. And we have a question on if any of you or how many of you offer 5-day boarding, and if so, what are the pros and cons? And so I don't know if that anyone could weigh in on that here. No, so this happens to be a grouping of schools that is full boarding component, 7 days a week. So that is, thank you for establishing that for the families. I also have a great question, which is about traditions. So if you have a fun tradition at your school, this parent would love to hear about it. And they happen to mention that, Carroll has their fall festival, which I think is noted on almost every student leaving Carroll, their favorite pastime, favorite thing. So what is your fun tradition at your school that you'd like to share?
I can share ours because our kids are waiting patiently, impatiently on eggshells here. We have something called Foliage Day in the fall, where we have a holiday and no classes during the week. And it is announced creatively by our head of school. And then our students with their advisee groups, they hike up to Burley Mountain, which is owned by the school here. It's about a 20-minute hike over there. And we have a barbecue, music, we have an alpine tower. And it's just, it's a day to appreciate, the natural environment here during peak foliage. So it's a surprise. Usually they tell me when it's going to be, and I have to be secretive, but they haven't told me this year. So I have no idea either. So I'm excited.
That sounds like a great tradition.
One that we really love at KUA, and I'm actually new to KUA this summer and got to participate in this tradition at the beginning of this year, but we bring all of our new students to campus early, new students and student leaders, and we all head out on camping trips around New Hampshire and Vermont. We spend 2 nights camping, and sort of as a statement of like wanting to establish relationships and connection and belonging for our new students before we kick off the start of school with classes. And oftentimes it's, seniors as they're getting ready to graduate, it's those like camping trips, those orientation trips that they're really reflecting on as being profound moments in their KUA experience. And even now I'm actually in New York City right now, meeting with some alums and prospective students, and the alums have like come back to these camping trips and orientation trips as really meaningful moments in their KUA experiences.
Great, thank you, Allison.
I thought of one that's a little less informal, and I think all of our schools have really neat events that are somewhat formal. We have a pie race coming up. It's like a race that everybody eats pie after, but all alums come back. But there are some that develop, and I'm sure others have them like this, that are just smaller, but they're kind of the fables of campus. And I think it's worth mentioning because I'm in the building that this has to do with. So McVicker Hall, which is our biggest building on campus, is on the list of most haunted buildings in Rhode Island. And I'm in it alone right now, so I hope everything goes okay. But our students have a tradition. Our freshmen always come in small groups at night. We usually do groups of 5 or 10 and stay for a couple hours and observe noises, and they all have different stories. And then our older students pre-COVID have done an overnight where we separate the kids into 2 halls and they do a full 24-hour ghost hunt. And who knows, there might be squirrels in the attic too, but they usually hear footsteps and whatnot. But it's become sort of this really informal campus tradition that is tons of fun. So
I would
Great.
say at Brewster, we probably have 2. We have Spirit Week, which is in February, and every day there's a different theme. And it always makes me a little bit nervous when we have families coming and they see kids and faculty wearing pajamas and things of that nature, but our faculty love it, our kids love it, and I just have to deal with it. But the other piece would be something that has really taken off is called the Quad Cup, and it is a compilation of events and weekend activities and evening activities and what our kids are doing during the day. And every kid is part of a residential quad on campus, and there's a point accruement over the course of the school year, and then there are challenges, and then there's a final week to it, and so there's this big lead up over the course of the school year. So I would say the Quad Cup is probably the biggest thing that our kids and our faculty enjoy, and they have ownership within their quad and representation across campus. So
Allison, you stole my tradition. We also do a 5-day, 4-night backpacking trip at the start of the school year. It's something that we've done for 50 years, and students definitely look back on that with a lot of fondness, but also at the moment when it's happening, terror. But I'd say the tradition I would say that's pretty interesting here is we have a polar swim tradition. So every Friday morning at 6 a.m, we have a little lake on the backside of our property, and there's a group of students that go out all year. So they cut a hole in the ice during the winter, they go swimming, there's a sauna, they do this before classes. And it's kind of a bucket list thing. Not every student in the school does it, but a lot of them do it at least once before they graduate. It's pretty crazy.
That is pretty crazy. It sounds really exciting. It's pretty great bucket list. On another topic, we have a question about a financial aid question that is, does financial aid cover boarding or just tuition costs? If you could answer that, that would be helpful.
So it's a great question. There is a fundamental difference between when we think about tuition in an independent boarding school and overall in totality versus potentially where this question might be coming from when you look at tuition relative to the university model. And so tuition in a boarding school comprises both tuition, but also room and board, right? And so we add it all together. I think most of us, when we think about our academic resource opportunities, there is an added cost to that. So you want to have conversations and questions ready about how does each school look at the totality of that tuition when you potentially combine both an academic resource expense and a tuition expense, and do they look at that as one lump sum, or do they look at it in 2 different ways or 2 different buckets from tuition, but also from a financial aid standpoint? It's a great question, but ultimately the way that we look at it is different than the university model. Hopefully that
Anyone
helps.
else? No, that's very helpful. I do have a couple of other questions that came in, which is what is it like as an onboarding for a 10th grade student at your school? And how do you bring them in as part of the community? And
Yeah, so I think a lot of our schools are probably similar in that we have robust orientation programs. And maybe one of the biggest misconceptions about our communities would be entry points. So there are a lot of junior boarding schools and K-9 schools that have students that apply for 10th grade. And then you might get kids who do public school for 2 years and then apply as reclassified 10th graders. So in terms of the 10th grade, it's a really important piece to talk to schools about. What is the culture around that? And I see it here at New Hampton. My son's in 10th grade, and he was really excited for the 2025 new 10th graders that we had, because it's an opportunity to meet new kids, to have new friends. So I don't think it's a matter of, who are the new kids. So that's something you want to get a sense of and talk to the students about when you have an opportunity to take part in a student panel. But I think, at a smaller school, we're not tiny, we're not huge, and we're all pretty close in terms of those numbers. Kids really want to lean in and get to know the new kids, and the faculty are there to help them make that transition. And we do that with, an orientation weekend where the class gets to spend time together, and it's not just the new kids over here and the returning kids. We bring them into, living with kids who have already been here for a year. So I think there's relationships that can develop quickly.
Also, it might be worthwhile finding out from every school, do they have a mentor-mentee program? Is there a 1v1 opportunity for your child as a new 10th grader to have someone to look out for or to look for who's looking out for them? The other piece too is that, as Will said, our kids are craving for new and more relationships. And we were right on that cusp of too big, too small. And so kids are really looking forward to that opportunity. But don't forget about that piece of mentor-mentee. And in an advisory group, find out from every school, is that advisory a compilation of all new students or a mix of both new and returning? And that provides another smaller, safe opportunity for your child as a potential new sophomore, 10th grader, to have other new kids in that group or returning kids to help and support in that transition.
Great, thank you. Kind of on the similar lines, there's a question about the integration and fostering of a day student potentially in with your boarding life, and how does that work? And I know this, it's the benefits of boarding school, but if some of you do have a day students, or I'm not sure what your ratio, some of you might be able to share that with some families, and that how that works, that integration with the two.
We at St. Andrews have a 50-50 split. So it's pretty much right down the middle. So our day students are also involved in the orientation process. They are together from the very beginning. They are even from orientation weekend, especially now that it's post-COVID, we can integrate even more. They're in the dorms, they're welcome in the dorms, they do sleepovers. We don't do 5-day boarding, but we have made arrangements with actually some Carroll families as well, that if your commute is of a certain distance, we've made arrangements for them to stay one night a week in the dorms. So usually like a Wednesday or Thursday night, we have a designated space for them to even help them a little bit more, because we know that can be really difficult. I think it's probably similar at all of the schools here. The day students are, they're a part of the residential life program. They are here on the weekends. They're encouraged to stay for dinner, after activities, stay for study hall, stay for extra help. They are welcome, and by the boarders too, because like we've said, the kids want more kids around. They want their friends there. So that's a big part of it, is just making sure the day students feel comfortable from the very beginning. They have a mentor. They're part of the advisory groups. They're part of dorm life.
Thank you.
Yeah, similar at KUA, I'm sure other schools. We are predominantly boarding, so we are 80% boarding, but just like any sort of minority population at our school, like given that our day students represent 20% of our population, we have to be really thoughtful in thinking about how we're providing opportunities for them to feel a sense of belonging at KUA. So lots of opportunities for day students. Like, our campus is open to day students pretty much all the time. We want them to be on campus, eating meals in the dining hall, coming for breakfast, staying, obviously they're there for lunch, but staying through dinner, being there on the weekends. And the majority of our day students take us up on that. And oftentimes sort of at the beginning of the year, I think kids are kind of like, wait, who's a who's a day student? And so it's just, I think creates a really robust campus culture, but it takes work. And we really have to think thoughtfully about how we're providing opportunities for everyone in our community to really feel a sense of belonging.
And that truly is how I feel, and I believe the families are feeling, is that your boarding schools offer a true sense of community for everyone. There is another question, which is, it is around the sports. Someone who has a rigorous and excels in athletics, how do they integrate and excel academically? So I guess with that, how do they meld together if they have this real rigorous schedule? Maybe I didn't know you touched upon your extracurriculars and some athletics, but maybe you could elaborate that a little bit for this parent.
I think the beauty of athletics at a place like New Hampton and the other schools is that your coaches are a lot more involved in your life here. And so they're checking in with teachers a little bit more, and they're encouraging you in the same way that your parents would at home to seek extra help and put in that extra time. I can't say enough, the value of our faculty here to the parents is incredible, because you can have conversations with, your son's basketball coach or hockey coach and say, hey, I've been trying to get him to take this class, but he's not really listening to me. And this might be familiar for anybody with a teenager. But when you talk through the advisor or the coach, it seems to resonate a little bit more. And this is something I encourage you all to do if you send your child to boarding school. I'm trying to do it with my own son. I need to, he's not going to listen to most things I say, but when it's coming from his advisor, who's a lot cooler than me, he is probably going to think twice and consider it. So same goes with the academic piece. If you have lofty goals in terms of athletics, that coach really holds, a special place in the life of that student. So they can be impactful with delivering that message that, hey, you need to be putting in extra time. And they're watching how they're spending their time here as well. They see, whether or not they're going to see their teachers during office hours and putting in the extra work.
Thank you. And I think as we wrap up this wonderful evening, what I would love is if each of you could give one bit of advice for the parents and or students embarking on this wonderful journey right now, as they look at your school as an opportunity for their student for high school. And just in the process, whatever you want to offer, some great advice. How about we start with you, Nick? I'll just go around.
Enjoy the process. Give your child space to digest the visits. Give them time. They will come to you and ask questions or make comments. But most importantly, last would be open-minded. Be open-minded to what's out there, because there's a great school out there for every kid. You just have to do a little bit of work to find it. So go into all these campus visits with an open mind, willing to digest everything that school is providing. Come with detailed questions, but enjoy the process. Give your child that space and opportunity to digest the experience, and be open-minded.
Chris, we'll move on to you. I'm going to go around my screen.
Oh, great. I would just say, just be honest and forthright and use your resources. And I think, as Carroll School families, you guys have some advantages in this process. Your kids are probably more self-aware and probably experience more adversity than a lot of the students that we might see in our applicant pools. And you also have great resources in your placement team. And I will say, like, school professionals like ourselves, we actually really care about finding a good match between the schools and the students. So I think we are a great resource, not to be self-serving, but we're going to be honest with you. We're going to be straightforward with you. So ask us those questions, be forthright, and use your great resources.
Thank you, Chris. JC?
I would expand a little bit on open-mindedness. I think that what you think you might want at the very beginning might not be what you want a few months later when you've really seen your options. Trust the resources, but perhaps not your neighbor or your friends, what was the perfect fit for your neighbor's son or your coworker's daughter or your older sibling. Every student's different. So keep an open mind and remember that your child has individual strengths, and your journey is going to be your own. So that's what I would keep in mind.
Thank you, JC. Will?
Well, I think I'll return to Chris's infomercial for boarding schools, because I think this is a really challenging thing for a lot of families to think about when they, 8th grade student, 13 years old, sending them off to boarding school. And I think you have many advantages as Carroll families. You are not that far away. Hopping in the car on a Saturday, coming up to watch your kid play a soccer game, then you go out to dinner with them and they bring their friends, and one of them might be from Germany, one might be from Vietnam, and the quality of those conversations are going to be amazing. I think that's the biggest surprise that you'll get when you send your kid to one of our schools, is the quality of those conversations. Because when you see them every day, you're trying to have that interaction with your kid, but sometimes it can be a little transactional. Clean your room. You left your ice cream out. But I think about my daughter coming back from summer camp, and it was the greatest conversation I've ever had with her, the ride home, and it kind of clicked. That's what can happen at boarding school. The quality time that you have when they're at home is pretty amazing. And then when they're here, they're really busy, and those check-ins can prove to be really, really helpful. So again, come visit, even if you're hesitant, and ask a lot of good questions. We're here to help you through this process.
Thank you, Will. Thanks very much. Allison?
Yeah, I guess, I would agree with everything my colleagues have said, but perhaps a different angle would be to kind of take a step back and take stock of what has been really helpful for you and your experience at Carroll. You've had the privilege of being at such an incredible school. And so kind of think about, like, what are the elements of the Carroll experience that have really worked for me and my child? And sort of how do you think about that on a different scale and in a boarding school community? And I think kind of transposing those into a boarding school experience and kind of thinking about what's really worked and what's important to you. What do you value in a community and in a learning community? And look for that. Ask those questions as you're visiting those schools. I think this can be an incredibly daunting and overwhelming experience for students and families, but it doesn't have to be. And in fact, I think it can be an incredibly empowering experience for your students, especially after the year and a half that we've all had. And so I think give yourself the permission to let it be that for you and for your student.
Thank you very much, Allison. Well, I have to say the information you all provided tonight is truly amazing. And I know the family is going to walk away feeling empowered and much more knowledgeable. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. The Secondary School Advising Office is very grateful for Nick Wilbur, Chris Bartlett, JC Arnone, Will McCulloch, and Allison Letourneau. We thank you very much. And thank you to our Carroll team behind the scenes who really made this night happen. We appreciate it. And we look forward to a wonderful, wonderful year ahead collaborating.